I wanted to make a video because there's a specific topic which I find really interesting, but also I think its prevalence is profound. In Mark Manson's Everything is Fucked, he calls it the consciousness car, and you split up into two people, the driver and the navigator. The driver is what he calls the feeling brain. The navigator is the thinking brain. Now it's very important that you make note of who's who. You need to realise the feeling brain is the driver. They're the one at the steering wheel. They make actions. Thinking brain is there only to give advice. By extension, everything you do has to go through the feeling brain. Now, in a different book, it's called two different things. It's called the conscious and unconscious. Now, which is which? The unconscious is the feeling brain, and the conscious is the thinking brain. And in relation to learning, this is what's really interesting. So I'll give learning a language as an example. People who learn a language which isn't their native language and end up speaking fluently, what's the difference between someone speaking fluently and someone else who's speaking, but they're having to think of it, they're having to take their time, and they're having to rack their mind to remember the right vocabulary to use and the right verbs to use? For the person who's fluent, the thinking brain isn't involved. It's just coming from the feeling brain. The driver, which is what controls actions, in this case speaking, is done with almost no effort. Now, someone who is trying to learn the language can speak it but takes time. They need the thinking brain to make logical connections. They need it to make mistakes which they can correct. And that all has to go through the feeling brain, as always. But it has to come from the thinking brain because they're not fluent, which means their conscious is controlling how they're speaking instead of their unconscious. Just to remind you, just so if you're confused, the conscious part of your mind is the thinking brain. Conscious thinking brain. That's what does logical processes. Now the thinking brain, oh my fucking god, the feeling brain doesn't do logical processes. Its main way of communication is through emotion. If you try and reason with the feeling brain, with rational concepts, or regurgitate it won't like it. So you need to empathize with the feeling brain and your unconscious, because they're the same. Now, what was the point of this video? The point was, if you ever want to make something habitual or make it look like you have no effort, you have to do it so many times that it transfers from the thinking brain, which is what allows you to learn and do that thing in the first place, to the feeling brain or the unconscious, which allows you to do it without thinking. It's just second nature. How long does this take? A lot of psychologists posit the sweet spot at around 21 days. However, there are, of course, exceptions. If you want to make a new habit, you need to do it for 21 days. And more specifically, if you want an action to go from the thinking brain's responsibility to the feeling brain's, then that needs to be done in 21 days. In 21 days, it'll go from the thinking brain to the feeling brain. That is all I have to share. It's not very applicable because I know a lot of people who'd who want and need this advice. They may not even know they need it because it's just a bit boring, this video, and those who need it the most won't end up watching it because it's just, there's not enough editing and but I thought it was really interesting how anything you want to implement or make new, you need to do. And that 21 days marker, it's only for something specific. Of course, you can't learn a language in 21 days, but that specific part of a language, which you've learned at the start, you can learn in 21 days, probably even less. A specific concept, whether that's the present tense or, yeah, that's all I had to share today.